They're not going to foul. The Heat will let it play out. It's over. At last, the long wait is over. After 47 years, the Denver Nuggets can finally call themselves NBA champions.
Pat Riley said something many years ago. I used to have it up on my board when I was a head coach in Sacramento, and I talked about the evolution in this game and how you go from a nobody to an upstart, and you go from an upstart to a winner, and a winner to a contender, and a contender to a champion. And the last step is after you're a champion is to be a dynasty. So we're not satisfied. We accomplished something this franchise has never done before. But
this is Andre Iguodala, and you are listening to The Morning Roast with Bonte and The Butcher on 95.7 The Game.
Plumlee, Laurie Marketing, Wendell Carter, Giannis.
I thought Giannis made the first list.
You should see this list we've got going.
I thought it was the first list.
Oh, no. We're almost at 40 names that Warrior fans want.
40 names.
40 names.
40 names. You heard Mike Breen on the call for ABC 7, ESPN. You heard from Mike Malone, the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic, Finals MVP, the Bill Russell Finals MVP. We got a lot of names here on the free agency list. We're 40 deep. Can we get to 100? I bet you we can get to 100.
Free agency, trades.
By the time this is all done, everybody on every single roster will be a Golden State Warrior.
Wembanyama? Let's just toss him in there.
Malik Monk?
We'll trade him for Steve Kerr straight up.
Malik Monk?
Malik Monk.
Davion Mitchell?
KCP's the missing piece.
By the way, Mad Dog Chris Russo gave his top five NBA title contenders for 2024. Now, we know Mad Dog Russo don't really know about hoops like that, but his number one
unless
contender.
It's Havlicek.
Yeah, unless John put some respect on Hondo.
Dusty-ass Havlicek.
Hey, that's Chris Muller's favorite player.
No,
put some
I know,
respect
but,
on that.
no, but there's
Hondo
a famous
a
Mad Dog rant about Havlicek.
I know.
Havlicek!
Havlicek was legit.
He took the bus to games.
Is he dustier than Frankie Albert? No, he's not.
Well,
Havlicek
Frankie
is
Albert,
baller.
come on, man.
Put some respect on Hondo. Put some respect on
Why
Hondo.
you gotta diss my boy Frankie Albert
I'm not,
like that?
but you
Why
disrespected Havlicek, man. You can't be doing that.
I hate the Celtics.
Yeah, but you can't be disrespecting Havlicek like that. Somebody come down your road to talk about Frankie Albert. No, so it's top five.
And I would say to them, yeah, it's the AAFL's 1949 MVP.
Warriors, Nuggets, Bucks, Kings, Thunder is top five NBA title contenders.
Go, give me again.
Warriors, Nuggets, Bucks, Kings, and Thunder.
It's an interesting list.
You know, KC and D'Lo's going to run with that at ESPN 1320. Man, don't say what? We're top five title contender? Yeah. Well, let's ask Jorge Sedano about it. ESPN, of course. NBA on ESPN. That's a high bar for Sacramento. Also, college football, NFL. Catch him on Around the Horn all the time. The Sedano Show podcast. We love George here on the Morning Roast with Joe Shasky, the Butcher, Bonte Hill. George, hell of a season for you. Always enjoy your coverage, man. You had a banner year as the Nuggets into the NBA season last night with a win over the Miami Heat to win their first ever NBA title. How you been, George?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right, let's just start here with the Denver Nuggets, man. What a run for them. 16-4 during this playoff run. Nikola Jokic almost averages a triple-double throughout the postseason. Murray dropping double-doubles left and right. Gordon finds it. Bruce Brown, KCP, you go on and on and on about this team. Now, Mike Malone said some things last night, which was very fun. I love it. Saying we're not satisfied with one. So, in your eyes, George, after they won the NBA championship, does the West now have a Denver Nuggets problem? Are they the top dogs here for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I would say so because they've got a fairly young group, and they're, for the most part, if I recall correctly, all under contract for a while.
Yeah, with the exception, I think, of Bruce Brown.
Yeah. Bruce is more of a short-term deal, but they clearly need him. I think he's kind of like I've always kind of, and I followed his career since college because I remember his time at the University of Miami under Jim Larrañaga. I have a lot of ties to that program, and he was always a good player back then. It was just a matter of how he fit, right? I think that the conversation I had with Michael Malone about him during the season, and I probably had them about a dozen times this year, including during the Western Conference Finals on ESPN Radio. And he just said that the way they sold him was, everyone talks about you as a guard, or are you a forward, or what are you? And he's like, we just think you're a basketball player. We're just going to have you play what you play and do what you do. And this is me now talking. I look at him as kind of almost like a little mini Draymond in a lot of ways. And I think that he fits with what they want to do. So, yeah, he's the type of guy they need to re-sign. But for the most part, to your point, everybody else is under contract. So, yeah, as long as they're healthy, and really we're talking about the two big guys in Murray and Jokic being healthy. I do think Gordon obviously plays a big factor. I had a prominent Western Conference coach tell me during the season about them, and this was just during the regular season. He said, if Aaron Gordon goes off, you're in deep trouble against those guys. So, and if you look at it, I believe they were undefeated this postseason when he scored 15 or more. Wow. So that ended up being true when it came to them. So, yeah, look, I think that the Warriors need to do some work. I think the Lakers need to do some work. I think everybody in the West has some work to do. I think the teams in the East kind of need to regroup some as well, including Miami.
Yeah, and you have good Miami ties, so I kind of want to ask you a question about defensively. Like Bam Adebayo, obviously offensively, there's a conversation there, but if you were creating a player in the league to go up against Jokic and at least slow him down a little, it would be someone like Bam Adebayo. Now, we saw Draymond last year when they didn't have Murray and they didn't have Michael Porter Jr. He did a pretty serviceable job against them, but they got beat up by Anthony Davis, the Warriors did, and now you got to go through Jokic. Like, outside of Bam Adebayo, is there a guy out there? Is Draymond on that list? Like, how are you slowing down Jokic? Because that, to me, getting a low-post presence defensively is one of the big things the Warriors need.
Yeah, man, it's just tough. I don't think there's a way to slow him down outside of him just having an off night occasionally, you know? So, and to your point, Bam is a four-time he's 25 years old. He's already a four-time All-NBA defensive player. So, you know, and Draymond is a former defensive player of the year and has been on the team numerous times as well on defense. So Anthony Davis, in theory, is the player that should be the most equipped to handle him because he's got the combination that you would want, which is athleticism and size. He's much bigger and taller than Bam and Draymond, and he couldn't do anything with him. So I just think the dude is at the peak of his powers right now, and there's not going to be much you can do to slow them down. I think that, you know, I think Steve made a good point when he did Draymond's podcast talking about Murray being kind of the head of the snake in a lot of ways, and you have to try to attack him some. I mentioned the Aaron Gordon stuff. I'm not going to do the thing about you let Jokic be a scorer because I do think that's oversimplistic, as Ramona Shelburne said at the beginning of her question a couple weeks ago. Because I just don't think you're conceding to him. That's not the point. But, yeah, I just think it's about trying to defend those other guys because he's just too good right now. It's kind of like when LeBron is at the peak of his powers and Steph is at the peak of his powers. Jokic is in that conversation with guys that you just have to do your best to limit him and make sure he doesn't beat you with the other guys.
Yeah, and all those other guys stepped up so well. KCP, Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, even as
look, Bonte, look, the reality is Miami's defense played well in that series.
I thought so, too.
Yeah,
120 points a game during the playoffs, and they scored 94 to win in a closeout game. The defense for Miami was not the issue. It was offense, and Denver's defense played much better beginning December 15th on. They were a top 10 defense and closer to a top 5 defense after that.
And you know what, George, you hit on it because they have a guy like Aaron Gordon, who you brought up, who's from down the road here in San Jose, about 45 minutes away from us, and we watched him grow up playing in Pro-Am leagues as a 17-year-old, and to see him go through this gauntlet where they found their Andrew Wiggins, you know, their two-way guy who can cut to the basket and defend all the top guys, whether it's Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Jimmy Butler. He made life difficult for Jimmy Butler. He came into his own, so I'm looking at the Warriors saying, what can they do to combat that length and that physicality? What is the chatter about the Warriors? When you're around the finals here, what are people saying about the Golden State Warriors and what they can do this offseason, George?
Well, they need size, as Shasky just mentioned, and I don't know how you get that because you need a combination of size and athleticism, right? It's not right. Kevon Looney obviously is a good player, but I think in certain matchups it's not going to work, as we saw with the Lakers, right? So you need some size and a combination of size and athleticism, perhaps a power forward who can stretch the floor a little bit too, in that regard. So when you go small with Draymond at the center, you've got a guy that can knock down that shot. In theory, a JaMychal Green type player, but more athletic and a little bigger if you can, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think they could use another wing player. I think everybody could use another wing player because the best teams, for the most part, still have really good wings. You know, Jimmy Butler, obviously, I don't care what he said in the postgame yesterday. he was never the same after turning his ankle in that Knicks series, and then he tweaked it again in Game 7 against Boston, and really was never the same. He never had any lift in this finals series. But you've got guys like Giannis, right? You've got guys like Butler, right? Like you've got, if you look at the great teams, Boston has 2 of them, right? Like they're still going to have wing players. So while you have Andrew Wiggins, you could always use another player. Now, it doesn't have to be as dynamic offensively as Andrew Wiggins, but you need another wing that at the very least another 3-and-D type player. Mm-hmm. So if I'm the Warriors, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, in theory, a 4-5 that can be somewhat athletic and can shoot the ball, and a wing player who can definitely shoot the ball, but is strong enough to defend the type of guys that I just mentioned, at least for stints during the game.
You know, you're so tapped in with the Heat because you've always, had your eye on them. Tyler Hero goes down, right? And they go on this run. Is that an outlier? Is there something to him being kind of a turnstile defensively? And I know they're not the same guy, but I saw a lot of Warrior fans like, see these combo scoring guards, they're a dime a dozen. You got to play defense, because they're talking about Jordan Poole and the similarities between Hero and Poole. What's the value of guys like that in the modern NBA? Because clearly offensively they have value, but there's the defensive side. Do we make too much of their defensive inabilities?
Well, let me speak to Hero first. I think Miami was better suited when Tyler was willing to come off the bench, because to your point, I think that defensively it became an issue with the starting group. It put a lot on Bam and Jimmy specifically, because remember at that time they were, Max Strus became a much better defender as the season went on, but that was not his thing. Like he's an average defender, maybe even an above average defender in certain instances, but you have an average defender with a below average defender, maybe average at best with Hero on a good day. And, they just put a lot, and Gabe Vincent or Kyle was starting at the point guard. So you got a really small point guard in a lot of those cases. So it just was a weird combination where they were just better suited, going with either Caleb Martin, who was an excellent defender, or some size like Kevin Love, as we saw as the postseason evolved. So I think they were best suited when Tyler was their sixth man. When he was the sixth man, they were the number 1 seed in the league, I think. Well, definitely in the East, but in the league last year, perhaps. Because I just think that there are certain things that Tyler can do, particularly when Jimmy's off the floor, that he can replicate offensively. And I think you can find ways and combinations to hide him better defensively in those scenarios. I think he's a much better player than Jordan Poole at this stage, because I just think he is a better playmaker, even though I know the numbers may be close or whatnot, but I'm just telling you, as someone who, and I've seen Bonte at a million Warriors games over the last couple of years. I've seen a lot of Jordan Poole, okay, and I've seen a lot of Tyler Hero, and I just think Tyler is a more consistent offensive player and playmaker. Let's just call it that. Jordan Poole, and he's become way more mature over the years, and I think that there's some chatter that maybe Jordan Poole needs some help in the maturity category along with consistency. So I do think there's a place for that, but I think guys need to understand what the role is. And maybe Tyler is probably trade bait for the Miami Heat, because they want to have another scorer that they can depend on, and maybe a more veteran player.
Dame.
And I think he's probably the one guy that you would link in those scenarios. Plus, Miami will have a full complement of picks that they can give up and pick swaps. They're going to be back to having pretty much what they need as far as that's concerned. But with Jordan Poole, I just don't think that with what the Warriors already have, if you're going to keep Steph and Clay, which clearly you're keeping Steph, but if you're going to keep Clay, which I think they are, right, and they're going to keep Draymond, this nucleus together, I think you have to move Jordan Poole to find one of those pieces that we talked about earlier. Yeah. Whether that's a 3-and-D wing, whether that's a power forward / center who can shoot the ball a little bit and defend a little bit. I think that, look, I'm not saying this is the exact guy, right? Because I don't even know what his contract status is. But you were talking about the Kings earlier, like a Trey Lyles type guy. Okay. I think that type of guy fits well with the Warriors. I don't know if Jordan Poole can fetch you that.
And his phone cut off. I know George was about to leave anyway because you gave us a few extra minutes here. Jorge Sedano, ESPN. Tell George Lubman, we said bye-bye, and we appreciate the time. We know he had to run anyway. We appreciate Jorge Sedano joining the Morning Roast. Trey Lyles.